These are 6 things that Royal Caribbean CEO refuses to change. Michael Bayley has run Royal Caribbean International since 2014. Every year he sails the President's Cruise and he takes live questions straight from cruise fans. No screen submissions, no PR filter standing between him and the mic. Over the years, guests have pushed him on 6 specific things. The same 6 issues coming up again and again, cruise after cruise. And 6 times he's said no on the record with his reasoning laid out in his own words. I pulled every one of those answers myself. Then I went and found the real numbers behind each one. What Wi-Fi costs a cruise line? How many people per day at CocoCay can physically hold? What casino revenue means to Royal Caribbean's bottom line? We're going through all 6 in his own words with the math laid out right next to them. And at the end, I'll tell you which refusals hold up under the math and which ones just sound better than they are. If we haven't met before, I'm Matthew from Portholes and Pixie Dust. We're a cruising family of 3 who sails Royal Caribbean often. Our videos are meant to inform, entertain, and inspire you to have the best cruise yet. Now let's get into refusal number 1. Refusal number 1, all-inclusive pricing. Celebrity Cruises rolled out an included fare with a drink package and Wi-Fi built right into the sticker price. Fans asked why Royal Caribbean wouldn't do the same. Bayley's answer? Our research says that about 50% of the guests don't want a beverage package. Our strategy has always been the unbundling of pricing to give people as much choice as they possibly can. He added that unbundling gets the fare in front of families at a lower upfront number, and families, in his own words, are the real core target market. Let's run that math ourselves. The deluxe beverage package runs about $54 per day per guest. Bundle that into every fare and a 7-night cruise climbs to roughly $379, whether you drink or not. For half of the guests who skip the package entirely, that's a straight fare increase with 0 benefit attached to it. My personal take, the math checks out. If half your guests don't want the package, forcing it on everyone raises the price for people who'd rather skip it, and that's a real cost landing on them specifically. But the argument gets a bit shakier once you're booked. Every add-on gets marketed hard after that point, and that pressure is a cost in its own. It never shows up in Bayley's math. There's a fairness argument running the other way too. A bundled fare gives budget-conscious families one number to plan a whole trip around from the start. An unbundled fare keeps growing every time they open Cruise Planner. Bayley's data may well be right that half the ship skips the beverage package entirely. The open question is how many of the other half would pay a little more upfront just to know their total cost before they even board. The logic holds up. It's one piece of a bigger picture, and there's more here worth weighing than the 50% figure alone. Refusal number 2, free Wi-Fi. Land resorts throw internet in for free without blinking. So why can't a cruise ship do the same? Same President's Cruise, same directness from Bayley. Bayley states, are we going to give free Wi-Fi? No. We gotta pay a ton of money for Wi-Fi. That line sounds like a CEO reaching for a bit of theater. So I went and found the real figure behind it, and the number backs him up completely. Starlink's Maritime service, the kind of satellite internet more and more cruise lines are switching to, runs around $5,000 a month per ship, plus roughly $10,000 in a one-time equipment cost for a 2-terminal setup. That's close to $60,000 a year in service fees alone before a single guest even logs in. And that figure doesn't include the bigger installations. Royal Caribbean reportedly spent $1.25 million putting Starlink's community gateway system on Star of the Seas by itself. Now, stack that against what guests pay for Wi-Fi on board, commonly around $20 per day per device, you can see why Royal Caribbean treats Wi-Fi as a cost to recover rather than a perk to hand out for free. Ships run on satellite internet. Land resorts run on an undersea and underground cable that's already built and largely paid off. That cost gap is the whole argument captured in a single comparison. My personal take, this is the most defensible refusal on the list. The cost structure at sea is different from a hotel on land, and the dollar figures back up what Bayley said, dollar for dollar. Refusal number 3, overnight stays at Perfect Day at CocoCay. As soon as the island opened, guests started asking when they'd get to stay overnight instead of sailing away at sunset. Bayley admitted Royal Caribbean looked into it and then called the idea problematic once the logistics got real. That logistics problem looks like this in numbers. CocoCay holds around 6,000 guests a day at normal capacity. When 2 ships docked at once, that number climbs past 10,000 people on a single island built for a day trip, not an overnight stay. After the planned Phase 2 expansion, 3 ships a day could push that towards 12,000 guests. Over 350 Bahamian staff live and work on the island to run it. Every one of them, along with the food, the supplies, the equipment, gets ferried out from the ship each morning and back again each evening. CocoCay runs entirely on what the ships bring in and take back out. There's no independent supply route feeding the island on its own. Senior Vice President Vicky Freed added the guest side of it. Cruisers like the beach day, she said, but they really do want to come back onto the ship and enjoy the fine dining, and they want to enjoy the entertainment that we have on board. My personal take? This one reads as operational reality more than a corporate excuse. Running an island built for 6,000 to 12,000 guests per day is a completely different operation than running one where guests sleep overnight. That shift would mean a second full crew rotation and an independent supply chain built for a demand signal that, according to Royal Caribbean's own guest data, might not be there in the first place. Refusal number 4, banning smoking in the casino. This is the one that pulls the most heated comments. Bayley says the dilemma is that there are many people who do want to smoke in the casino. I know that's not a popular response, but it's the truth. He said Royal Caribbean tests this every couple of years, banning smoking on 1 or 2 ships at a time, and the result is less people go in the casino, and that's the reality of it. That testing result matters more than it sounds like it should. Casino revenue isn't broken out on its own. It's folded into onboard spending, and onboard spending runs about 30% of the total cruise line revenue industry-wide. The casino itself is widely cited as the second biggest onboard earner there is, right behind beverage sales. Royal Caribbean keeps the exact casino figure to itself, but if smoking bans shrink casino traffic the way Bayley describes, that's a direct hit to one of the ship's biggest profit centers. That's a serious business trade-off in its own right, not just a matter of guest comfort. To their credit, Royal Caribbean has added non-smoking casino spaces on several of its ships, including the brand new Legend of the Seas. Though it's come at a cost of the other areas. Utopia of the Seas converted a wine bar, a comedy club, and an English pub into casino space. Then it turned its entire original casino into a smoking-only area once the new non-smoking room opened. My personal take? This is the refusal where the business case and the guest experience pull hardest against each other. Testing shows fewer people gamble in a smoke-free casino, and a casino's revenue is a real moneymaker for Royal Caribbean. It's one of its biggest sources of onboard income. That still leaves the current setup uncomfortable for anyone hoping for a smoke-free evening near the slots. Refusal number 5, making Diamond and Pinnacle harder to reach. As Crown and Anchor's top loyalty tiers have filled up, some cruisers have asked Royal Caribbean to raise the bar for entry. Bayley's answer was a flat no, we have no plans to do that. He pointed to where the complaints cluster, mostly transatlantic and trans-Pacific crossings where top-tier members concentrate in unusually high numbers. Bayley says 90% of the sailings, it's just not true that the ship feels overrun with Diamond Plus and Pinnacle members. Royal Caribbean keeps its Diamond Plus and Pinnacle membership counts private, so there's no release figure to test that 90% claim against directly. The point thresholds themselves are public though. Diamond Plus takes 175 cruise points. Pinnacle takes 700. Both numbers are steep, enough that reaching them takes years of frequent cruising, which lends real weight to Bayley's argument, even without an exact headcount behind it. My personal take, this is a real data point worth remembering if you're chasing status yourself. The crowding complaint sounds louder online than it likely plays out across the fleet. Royal Caribbean has the sailing by sailing numbers to know that for certain. They're choosing not to share the raw figures publicly. Refusal number 6, folding gratuities into the fare. Now personally, this is the one I would change first if I ran the place. Guests have asked more than once why gratuities aren't built directly into the cruise fare instead of left as a separate daily charge that some people remove at the front desk. Standard cabins run $18.50 a person per day, suites run $21. For 2 people on a 7-night cruise, that adds up to more than $250 charged separately from the fare you already booked. Bayley's answer leaned on the fact that different countries expect different tipping models. He called the current setup the model that seems to be generally the most productive, effective, and rewarding for the employees. He acknowledged that there are real trade-offs either way, but landed on, we think we've got the right system in place. My personal take, I understand the international market argument, but a system that depends on guests choosing not to remove their gratuities is really betting on crew pay on guest goodwill cruise after cruise. That's a shakier foundation than Bayley's framing suggests. Of everything on this list, it's the refusal I question the most. What do all 6 of these refusals have in common? Line up all 6 next to each other and a pattern shows up, one you don't see looking at them one at a time. Free Wi-Fi and the CocoCay overnight refusal are backed by hard operational costs and logistics, numbers that don't move no matter how loudly guests ask for something different. The casino smoking refusal is backed by revenue Royal Caribbean won't disclose, but clearly works hard to protect. 2 of the 6 all-inclusive pricing and the Diamond Plus pushback are backed by Royal Caribbean's own internal research, data guests never get to see for themselves. That means you're trusting the company's homework rather than checking it yourself. Only one, gratuities, is a policy choice dressed up as an operational one. Everything else on this list has a real cost or a real number sitting behind it. Gratuities has a preference sitting behind it instead. That distinction matters beyond just scoring Bayley's answers. It tells you which one of these 6 are worth watching for a future policy change. A cost-based refusal shifts when the underlying cost shifts. Satellite internet gets cheaper over time. CocoCay's capacity keeps expanding. Both of those refusals could look completely different in 5 years without Royal Caribbean's philosophy changing at all. A preference-based refusal only changes if the company decides on its own to change its mind. Gratuities is a choice sitting on the list, not a constraint, and that's why it's the one most likely to stay the way it is. All right, now let's go back to the scorecard. If we line all 6 of these refusals up, free Wi-Fi and the CocoCay overnight refusal are the 2 I buy completely. The cost and logistics arguments are real, specific to how a ship operates day to day, and now you've seen the dollar figures and capacity numbers behind both of them. All-inclusive pricing and the Diamond Plus pushback are reasonable positions with real data behind them, even though I'd still want to see that data myself instead of taking Royal Caribbean's word for it. The casino smoking refusal, I understand the business case there. A real chunk of onboard revenue is on the line, but I still don't love the outcome for anyone stuck near a smoking table for a full week. And gratuities folded into the fare, that's the one I think Royal Caribbean gets wrong. A policy that depends on guests choosing not to opt out is a bet on guest goodwill, not a guaranteed system. It's the only refusal on this list built on preference instead of proof. So there you have it. 6 refusals. 2 solid, 2 reasonable, 2 I'd push back on. With another president's cruise on the horizon, I'll be interested to see what Bayley gets asked next. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. We post 2 new videos every single week. And if you're interested in finding out the real math behind Royal Caribbean's drink package, check out the video right here, and I'll see you over there.